we would bring it into, businesses that we were selling sponsorship to. And businesses were like, yeah, of course I'd be on this. Wow, this is awesome. Sure, like let's sign a deal. And we were like, okay, this is like helping us close deals.
Welcome to episode 132 of The Route, presented by White Whale Marketing. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. As always, I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. Before we get into today's guest, just a couple things to cover. First off, if you haven't already, follow us on social media. If you're watching us on YouTube here, you can see at the top hand of the corner, it says The Route. Underneath that, it says at The Route Sports. So that's on all platforms, and that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and even LinkedIn. And LinkedIn's kind of the unique one, right? Where maybe most podcasts won't have that, but for what we're discussing, the people we have on, it's a great platform to maybe grow your network, start your network, or just continue to expand it. So check us out there at The Route Sports. And feel free to even connect with me. You'll see on all the posts when we release an episode, it says hosted by Christopher Nascimento. Just check me out there. So looking forward to seeing all these new followers we should be getting. And then in addition to that, before we get into the guest, one last thing is to take the time to subscribe, follow, like, rate 5 stars, do all that good stuff on all the different platforms we're on. If I'm not mistaken, I believe we're on 10 audio platforms. So that's all the big ones: Google, Amazon, Apple, Spotify, etc. So check us out there. Depending on what platform you're on, it's a little different, but it does help us grow a little bit easier. So check that out. And as I mentioned, for YouTube, we do have visual podcasts as well now. You can go to the White Whale Marketing YouTube channel, and we have the Route playlist where we have the last 60 episodes since we started doing videos. So check it out there, White Whale Marketing. That's White Whale MKTG, and that's on YouTube. You can check us out there. So with that now covered, we can get into today's guest. I'd now like to welcome someone who's part of our back-to-back co-founder episodes. So the next one will be their co-founder as well. So with experiences in sports marketing, sales, events, media, and more, the co-founder and CEO at FanSaves, Shannon Ferguson. Welcome to The Route. How's it going?
It's going so well. So great to see you.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I was mentioning to you before we started recording that I always thought I reached out to FanSaves ahead of time, and then once you guys reached out to me, I realized, oh, that's my bad. I haven't reached out yet. So I'm excited to kind of hear both of your journeys, and I guess we can just start with taking me through your route. So where did it begin, and how do we get to where we are today?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I think I often talk about how when I was growing up, I thought life should be linear. Like I thought life was going to be, graduate high school, graduate university, get a job, start your life, and it's just linear. And it's absolutely been non-linear since probably my late 20s. So I did, graduate university on time from Wilfrid Laurier University out in Waterloo with a degree in communication studies. I did a post-grad in broadcast journalism. Tried to break into the broadcast journalism industry right at in the middle of the recession in 2008, 2009. So that didn't quite pan out as I thought it would. But fortunately, I ended up starting my career in sports marketing. I worked at an online sports book, learned so much, really loved everything, every part of being in that industry. And growing up as a competitive hockey player, it was just like a natural progression to work in sports. I ended up working in Montreal, Calgary, Toronto, ended up in ad agencies and marketing companies. And then, back in 2015, my mom passed away, brought me back to my hometown. And at that point, couldn't really find a job that in marketing that really met my expectations. So started my first marketing business, marketing and events company. And from there, one of my clients was the new minor professional hockey team in Cornwall, and ended up meeting my co-founder Chris, who was a player who broke his finger in a fight. We ended up taking over all the marketing, sponsorship, sales of the team, really revamping it. And that's when we, came up with the idea for FanSaves in the summer of 2017.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. There's so much to kind of get into there, even just as we begin here. And I was just jotting down notes quickly. So, Taj, maybe you're gonna have to clip that a little bit. But as you're kind of mentioning there, you never thought, or you thought it was going to be linear, but then you quickly realized it wasn't actually going to be. So, what was that realization like? What was the moment that made it clear that, hey, maybe things aren't always going to go as planned?
I think it was actually just a couple of years ago. So a couple of years after my life kind of fell apart in a way. I, was 29 years old. I went through a divorce and my mom passing away in the same year, and kind of just felt really lost and felt like, oh my God, I've worked so hard to, build my life to where it is. And now I kind of had to start over. So it was excuse me, it was after a lot of like soul searching and a lot of like soul work, where and FanSaves was really taking off as well. Where probably about two or 3 years ago, I realized, oh my goodness, okay, like it's not supposed to be linear, and look at everything I've learned since that like valley in my life. And it's the same in business. It's all peaks and valleys, and I think you're always just you climb one mountain and you see another like mountaintop and a valley to get there in the in between. So I think it's just that's life. And yeah, it took going through some really hard times to figure that out.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense, and I appreciate you kind of sharing all that. Where I think that's a realization a lot of us, especially in sports, kind of realize where, maybe you always think when you're in university, you're going to be, coordinator, manager, director, CMO, and then just kind of go from there and it's going to be the perfect career. Then you're going to start a sports marketing business and afterwards it's going to take off. But clearly, things don't always go as planned. So when you're dealing with these peaks and valleys, I know you mentioned and a lot of us go through as well. Do you have any maybe like tips that people listening, because a lot of our audience is in that university age bracket or recent graduates? How would you say, hey, like before you get that first, let's say, peak or valley, how would you maybe weather those storms that are going to be upcoming?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's as easy as like saying yes to everything. Do whatever you can, at as young an age as you can, to get different experiences and to learn different things. Because what you're doing when you do that is like you're equipping yourself, you're building your tool kit. You're building out that like resilience, and you're learning every step of the way. And I had took jobs along the way that weren't in sports. Although I've always loved sports, but I took those jobs where some of it was like grunt work and some of it was really hard. And I would think, oh my God, I shouldn't be doing this. But I look back and I'm like, I learned so many lessons from those kind of not so great jobs. And I think, these days people just think, yeah, it's going to be easy and you're just going to go from one level to the next level to the next. But when you have those difficult situations and you build that resilience through that adversity, then you're just coming to the table more well equipped than your peers. And it shows, it really does show, because people who kind of have that, they're gritty, like, and gritty people in sports go further every time.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And to be honest, that's definitely something even in my own career I've been kind of looking at, right? Where, I was working with a pro team and then I was like, you know what, let me take the leap and try doing something on my own here. And then sometimes depending who I talk to or, LinkedIn, as good as it is, sometimes you see all these different accomplishments that people in your network are doing. And oh wow, like I would love to just be climbing the ladder at the Cowboys or the Maple Leafs, etc. I could just see all these things going, and those titles are nice, and definitely sometimes you're like, oh wow, should I have gone that linear route, quote unquote, if I was able to, and definitely kind of maybe makes you think twice. But then what you're saying there about trying everything, being gritty, kind of getting those experiences, I think you're right. Like in the long run, regardless, those experiences that you learn, it's almost invaluable because at least for myself, and I'm sure yourself as well, when you're like in a corner and you have to figure out that problem because otherwise there's nothing else to do. That's when you really start figuring things out, getting all these unique experiences. So that's definitely cool that you've been going through that. And I guess maybe going back to the beginning of your career a bit further, I guess one of those maybe initial valleys you may have dealt with was breaking to the broadcasting during the recession. So how did that go? Did you maybe have internship programs or internship opportunities coming out of school? Because I know that's something that some programs do. Or is it really on your own, figuring it out, calling whoever you can, and trying to break in?
Yeah, so it's really cool because I've always had this passion for media and the broadcasting world and journalism. So when I did my post grad, yes, I definitely had an internship, and I actually had one of the coolest internships in my class. I interned at Entertainment Tonight Canada, so that was like a dream internship. And this was one of the places where it was really cool to be there, but it was a lot of like this grunt work where I was like, I can be on TV, I can host. Like, why am
Yeah.
I transcribing B-roll? But I did it. I put in the work. I worked really hard. I stayed on extra time, and I remember having a conversation with one of my superiors. And again, this was 2009, and I was like, "So when am I going to get hired? Like, I'm ready." And they were kind of like, everyone here, like there's people that have been here for 20 years at Global at the time. They're like they're getting pink slips, and we're not
Wow.
hiring right now. So like don't get your hopes up. We're not going to hire an intern when we're letting everyone else go. And it was soul crushing because
Mhm.
I really thought that was my path. Um, so I just remember being kind of defeated. I was living in Toronto.
Mhm.
I ended up serving, I ended up waitressing, working, in Toronto that way, thinking, oh my goodness, I just did 5 years of school and no one's like hiring right now. So, the really cool thing about it is when I was working in at the online sports book, I actually started a blog and it really took off. And it was about, it still exists. It's about dating and relationship advice. But that actually catapulted me back into like this journalism world. And I was writing for the Huffington Post and Elite Daily. I ended up getting like a podcast out of it. I ended up getting interviewed by MTV. And from there, I ended up, eventually hosting a television show here in my hometown when I moved back for about 3 years. So, while building FanSaves.
Mhm.
So,
Wow.
I always think like, oh my goodness, even though it didn't work out in Entertainment Tonight, I still ended up where I was supposed to be,
Mhm.
still, doing my other passion outside of sports, which is like journalism and broadcasting. So again, it goes back to what I said before, always say yes, always do these things because you never know what opportunity is going to arise.
Yeah, no, that's such a cool story that you're just sharing there. Where I think a lot of people can, without even realizing, they can do something similar to that, or they can just kind of create their own opportunity just by like saying yes or just starting something, right? Where you're just speaking about your blog, and that kind of stands out to me because when I was in university, I never really thought about, but we had a digital marketing class and you had to write blogs. It's like, okay, fine, you get to do it, you get your own website. And then one thing led to another where, that's how this whole podcast thing started for myself. And at the moment I never realized who you can meet, who you can chat with, etc. But then one thing led to another. So I'd love to maybe hear your opinions on, starting your blog and how you kind of maybe grew with that, because I think maybe people listening can take some of your insights from that, maybe apply it to themselves, right? Whether they're trying to break into the media space and start writing, let's say, writing articles about the Senators every single day, right? They're almost like their own, sports writer, or maybe same thing can go for sports marketing, where they're just providing their own different opinions. Do you have maybe advice for the people listening on how they can maybe start that?
Yeah, I love thinking back to how organically my blog started. It didn't even like it just was very organic in the sense like I remember again working in this corporate office, working sports, like, and I was the only woman on my team
Yeah.
for in sports marketing. And I was married at the time, so I'm like, oh yeah, I know all about like relationships.
Yeah.
Turns out I didn't. But it ended up one of my colleagues that sat across from me, he's like, you should start a blog because people are making money like making blogs these days.
Mhm.
So I've always loved writing. I've always been a writer. I love reading, writing, everything like that. So I had never really put myself out there. Like I never shared my writing with the world, let's say. So it was really scary. And it didn't even, I didn't even have a website at first. I was using this like weird blog platform.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just wrote my first article and it was really scary. It was really scary to press like post. And then I shared it on Facebook, and all these people were like, oh my God, this is great. And it really boosted my confidence. And then every time I would post, people like, I just got this following, and people were telling me, oh my goodness, you're really inspiring me. Oh my goodness, I needed to hear this. Wow, like you're helping me. So then
Mhm.
it turned to be less about me and more about how can I help people? Who am I helping? Because I was giving like this like really blunt like relationship advice that
Sure.
wasn't as common back then. Um, so people like again, and then it turned into a website, and then I taught myself how to make my first website, and then I
Mhm.
taught myself how to grow and brand myself that way, and then that eventually allowed me to grow in my marketing role and get better marketing positions. So again, it all goes back to that. So if someone is out there and they're, they want to write about the Sens, or they want to write about whatever like sport they love, just begin. Like I always say, just start. Just do your first article. Don't think so far ahead and plan, like, because you can't really plan about what's
Yeah.
going to happen. I mean, planning's great, but I always just say, just do your first one. It's like baby steps, one foot in front of the other, and you never know what's going to come out of it. And for me, the biggest thing that came out of it was just how it really grew my confidence.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I like what you're saying there just brings me back where remember when we were writing our first blogs, the prof said, "Hey, don't worry about your first one because it's going to be shit compared to your 100." And he's like, no matter what you do, no matter how much time you spend, let's say you're, like you were saying there, planning, breaking it down, reviewing it, etc. He's like, regardless, your first one, no matter what you do, will always be the worst. So that I think that's kind of a great piece of advice that you're sharing there as well. And I guess then building on that, um, I know you're mentioning the online sports book. Did that just, maybe for me writing your blog, that opportunity led to that where you're like, hey, like I learned all these digital, you know, forms of marketing through this blog and podcast. Is that how that new position arose for you?
So I got the job at the sports book, and I learned so much. Like again, coming out of school, I had had a couple of other like jobs, but this was like my first kind of career move. So I learned so much, and I always say like there are still things that I learned in that job that I bring to FanSaves today, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm so grateful for that. And like still friends I have and friendships I made. So really, for me, it kind of like I always think of that as like the beginning of my career, especially my career in sports. And it's just really cool that like my blog, the Love Hawk, came kind of out of that as well. And then it kind of just made me this like more well-rounded employee person back when I was still like finding jobs, where it was like, yes, I have this corporate experience. Yes, I was leading a team. I
Mm-hmm.
was able to like manage a ton of digital assets, coordinate and grow a brand essentially. But I also had this like personal experience. So for me, it kind of all ties in together. And
Yeah.
without those like 2.5, 3 years of my life, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'd probably be in a completely different position right now.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And I guess, like building on that as well, I think maybe some of the key questions that a lot of people, when they try to break into the sports industry, right? Let's say they graduate and they go into accounting, they realize, hey, this isn't for me. So they want to then break out into sports. Do you have any maybe like tips on how you got that first role that then helped you so much where you're even still using some of those lessons today?
I remember my interview. So I kind of knew someone that there, but that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really like why. But I remember my interview, and again, it was with two like men, and I went in, and I remember just like shit talking them because they were Habs fans and I'm a Leafs fan. I
Yeah.
think that's why I
Oh,
got it. Not
yeah.
because I'm a Leafs fan, but because I like held my own and I was like, oh my God, like the Habs suck.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really think though, the experience, like obviously I had my university degree. I had like, worked in some media positions. I was like really at that point, my my work experience was good on like the coordination and kind of like the marketing and PR side. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of built that up. So I always say again, like oftentimes, and we see this at FanSaves too. So like so many times people think I want to work in sports. Me
Yeah.
too, right? Like Chris and I, when we met, we had this goal like, oh, well, we can work for, I could work for the Leafs one day. He could work for the Sens. And people think that's the only thing you can do in sports. Like, okay, I'm going to go work for a sports team. But like, there are so many other things. And with FanSaves, it's so cool because we have people that work for us that had this dream of working in sports. And now instead of just working for one team on one team only,
Mhm.
they're getting to interact and work with all of these sports teams all at once. So, I mean, going back to your initial question, I think again, when people are thinking they want to get into sports, this day
Yeah.
and age, there's sports tech, there's sports media, there's working for the actual sports team, selling tickets, selling sponsorship. There's so many things. If you love sports, it doesn't just have to be I'm going to go be my ultimate goal is to be the director of corporate partnerships for the San Francisco 49ers. Go
Mhm.
Niners, right?
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes sense. And to be honest, that's how this podcast started, right? Where I remember, I think I was in stage up. I told the professor, I'm like, hey, like I think I want to do sports business, and he's like, no, no, don't do that. He's like, there's not enough jobs, and he's like, you're good at business, just stay to business. I was like, oh, okay. And I always thought, to work in sports, you're either gonna have to be at the beginning general manager, agent, etc. And then once you start having more conversations, you start, maybe doing coffee chats. You're like, oh wow, like as you mentioned, there's so many different sectors that touch sports, right? We're either like you can see consumer brands where they have someone who just does sports marketing, right? And that's something maybe a lot of people don't realize initially. So I think even just having people like yourself on, kind of sharing how, hey, you can work, for someone like FanSaves, and not only will you still be in sports, but then you're interacting with so many different teams or different types of sports or so much more. So I think that's very cool to kind of share with people as well. And before we get into fan saves, I know you mentioned going back to your hometown, one of your first clients was the hockey team, and that's where you then met Chris. You mind maybe sharing how you were able to get a hockey team as a client, and then maybe kind of building on from there, how your relationship with Chris to start fan saves fostered from there?
Yeah, great question for sure. I mean, I'm sure you've seen a theme
Mhm.
since talking, but I'm very scrappy. When I want something, and I think it goes back to again growing up playing hockey, like I just don't give up, right? If there is a client I want, if there is something I want, I am gonna get it. And if I don't, sometimes it's like something better comes along. So, I mean, again, at that time, I was still dealing with so much grief from losing my mom. And it really, like, I just had to focus on something else. So, again, for me, getting that client ended up being someone I knew told me, hey, they're looking for someone to help with marketing. And then I ended up knowing someone like who had bought the team. And like, this is not just true in business, also true in sports, also true in life. It's all about who you know, it's all
Yeah.
about your network, it's all about the people that you are surrounding yourself with. And even those that you're not surrounding yourself with, but that you've met along the way, so many people don't realize that like every opportunity is like amplified when you amplify your network. And really getting that client, for me, it was kind of who I knew because I was respected. My people knew that I was doing good things. People knew that I provided really good work, really good service. So it was kind of a no-brainer. Like they were kind of like, wow, okay, you're coming to me, and yeah, of course you can help out. And they were kind of like they were just in their growing stages as well. And then
Hmm.
of course Chris was playing. I didn't even know who Chris was.
Yeah.
And then he got in a fight behind the net. He broke his finger. I got a call a couple days later saying he's going to come into the front office. He's going to be the sales and marketing director. And I was like, "Are you firing me? Like, are you letting me go? You don't need me anymore?" And they're like, "No, no, stay on. We want you guys to work together." And I kind of had my backup because I was like, "Who's this guy like coming
Yeah.
in?" And when he came in, our minds just like melded. We met and literally, we just never stopped talking. Like we always had so many ideas, and we just completely kind of like flipped the script and turned the team on its head and got the players and the team out in the community and did some
Hmm.
really cool things and cool activations and cool sponsorship stuff. So yeah, again, I always say like everything for a reason, and there's
Yeah.
so many things that had to go wrong for FanSaves to be born and for things to go right.
Yeah, no, that's a great quote there, where so many things had to go wrong for them to go right. One last thing I wanted to ask you before you get into fan saves, and that's something that you were just saying there about how it's so important your network, right? You're touching on that, and then the question I wanted to ask was, how would you recommend people listening amplify their network, right? To then get these opportunities to arise.
Yeah, I think it's as simple as like putting yourself out there. So many people are like nervous to speak their mind or share like their life or share what they're doing. And for me, it's become kind of part of my personal brand to just be vulnerable and to just put myself out there. And then now at this stage, it's really cool because people are like reaching out to me and they're saying, "Oh my God, you're inspiring me. Oh my God, oh my God," and I'm just like, what? I'm just little
Yeah.
old me sharing my story. But way back then when I was younger and just getting out of university, for example, I again, I never really thought that I was building my network at that time. It wasn't something I was like actively doing,
Hmm.
but just being a nice person, just showing up on time, being a good employee and, getting amazing recommendations and, being that person who stepped up and then, was got to meet like the president of the company, like just little things. People take those things for granted. I mean, being a good person and a hard worker can go a really long way because then people want to help you. Then people are
Hmm.
like, I remember you and I remember that you did good work and that you were amazing and I have someone to introduce you to. And it's like those connections are so important because warm intros, like that's where business is done.
Yeah.
Cold calling is great, but warm intros are like nothing beats those. So I think really just always being nice and always showing up and always being respectful, that's how you start building that network and it starts building organically. And then you just get to the point where it's like, okay, now I can help others and I can network and I can introduce people to
Yeah.
the right people in kind of that reciprocal way. So yeah, giving back. I always say like give before you receive, and in
Hmm.
networking, I find that's always helped me.
Yeah, no, it's almost like a full circle moment, right? Where you just that happened to you, and now you're able to kind of pay it forward. And funny enough that you're saying that quote, that's something my dad said to me and my sister growing up. He's like, give before you receive. So, no, that's good stuff. And I guess now we can kind of move on to fan saves, right? You kind of briefly mentioned how you and Chris first met, did great work together. How did the initial idea for the company come to be? Was it something where you guys were working on a project and you're like, hey, this is what we should be doing, or this is something we need? How did that, blossom?
Yeah, so it was the summer of 2017, and so at this point we were working together, but we were kind of like dating and on the down low because we were working together. So we were spending all of our time together basically, and we'd both go out separately in the mornings, and we'd leave to go sell sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember specifically, like, we were both kind of running into businesses like asking for more. And do you have more than a scoreboard ad? Do you have more than
Yeah.
just a ring board? We want more. And then one day I went into Menchie's, actually, the frozen yogurt
Yeah.
place. And the woman was so nice, but she's like, I've been sponsoring the junior A team here forever. I put a coupon in the back of the game day program and I
Mm-hmm.
never get any back. And even if I did, I wouldn't know who was coming in through my doors. So
Mm-hmm.
I respectfully am not going to sponsor your team because like the sponsorship doesn't bring me anything. I don't get any
Yeah.
ROI on it.
Mm-hmm.
So like I remember going like home that night and saying like I really thought she was going to sponsor. And
Yeah.
it kind of triggered this like, turn of events where we said, what if we had something digital that where that coupon that was in the game day program could be on an app
Mm-hmm. Of
and we could sell it as part of our, inventory. We were working on commission, so we're looking for ways to make more money.
course. Yeah.
We could sell it and it could help, add value to our sponsorship packages. And we thought, okay, it's digital. It's, a way to track who's coming through those doors with the data. And then it's a way to actually drive people in so they can see who those sponsors are and support the sponsors that support their favorite teams. So it kind of just like grew from there. Chris, I went to Ottawa one day and I found this like free app maker, and I went on it, and I actually first built an app for the team. And one of the tabs was called FanSave, no S, space in the middle. And I built it out as part of the team's app. And we would bring it into, businesses that we were selling sponsorship to. And businesses were like, yeah, of course I'd be on this. Wow, this is awesome. Sure, like let's sign a deal. And we were like, okay, this is like helping us close deals. So from there, we kind of validated that this was a problem that we could solve. And that's when, we bought the website. Fansave.com wasn't available, threw an S on the end, took that space away in the middle. FanSaves was born. We launched the app in February 2018. And the rest is kind of history.
No, that's very cool. Just how like organic it came to be, and even just kind of starting on our own, and one thing led to another. And I guess maybe then building on that, do you mind maybe sharing with the people listening what FanSaves does more in detail, and then maybe kind of going from there?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, FanSaves offers fans discounts and deals from the sponsors of their favorite teams and organizations. So users can think of it like Instagram meets Groupon, but our teams, who are our clients, they use FanSaves as their team's digital coupon book. So you might remember back in the day, if you were a season ticket holder or a season ticket member, you would get like a book with a bunch of coupons in it, coupon book. It would get stuck under your car seat. You'd forget about it, never use it. So season ticket holders get better deals, but the public can also get deals from these sponsors. You follow your favorite team, and then you get deals from their sponsors. You could follow as many teams as you want. So it really hooks you into this network. So if you're traveling to a different city, even if you're not, a crazy fan for that team, you don't have to go and, commit to downloading their app. You can just follow them on FanSaves and get discounts and deals for free.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess then one of the questions I have before we kind of get into the last two questions I'd like to wrap up with, do you mind maybe sharing for those listening what the day in the life of the CEO slash co-founder of FanSaves looks like? Just because maybe someone's listening and like, hey, like I'd like to start my own business, and I'd love to hear what that's like.
Oh my goodness, it's changed so much. It's really like it's become it's evolved. So, when we started, when it was just Chris and I, it was literally just like every single piece of the business I was touching. And I often call myself a recovering perfectionist. So I've had to overcome a lot of those perfectionist tendencies and that like control that you need because it's your baby, right?
Yeah.
So early on, and even with our first, couple of employees, I was very like everything needed to be run by me. And now we're just so lucky. We're a team of 8, and we're just so lucky to have really good people working for us and who are growing with FanSaves and who see that vision. And I have grown as well because I trust them so much that I don't need my hands on every little piece of the puzzle that's making this this big vision come together. So a lot of now what I get to do is less working in the business and more working on the business. And sometimes I'm like, oh, like I miss the fun like marketing stuff. Sometimes I'll tell my employees like I'm like, can you just share that like file with me? I just want to do some like design work today because that like calms my brain. But a lot of what I do in the day to day is like the financials, the getting ready for investment, the granting, the business stuff, which is fun in itself. But I'm a really creative person, so I do miss those creative conversations. But yeah, a lot of it is just a lot of like gritty business work, and it kind of again goes full circle back to those early days when I would have to show up and do all that gritty work back then. Now it's kind of just in a different way, and we have a team that really takes care of the fun stuff.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I guess before we wrap things up, I have two questions I like to ask every guest today because I think it puts a perfect, let's say, bow on the episode. So, obviously, went through your whole career so far, and it's been fantastic. And I like to say, and I think people who've listened to this episode for 132, something like that episodes now, they're gonna get tired of it. But I'm always gonna say I'm gonna live until I'm 103, right? And at that moment, I'm gonna be on a rocking chair thinking back to all the good times. And fortunately, I have this podcast to maybe remember some of those good times. So with that, let's say you get to be 103 as well. You're on the rocking chair, sitting back and forth. What's one story to date that kind of stands out in your career so far that when you're on that rocking chair, you're gonna be like, wow, I can't believe that was my career.
Oh my goodness. To date, there's literally, I feel like every day I'm pinching myself and saying, holy cow, how do I get to do this? Like, I feel very grateful and very blessed all the time saying, I we always say like manifested this. I
Yeah.
manifested this life. I always said this is what I was going to do. When we started FanSaves, we had this like vision and it's every step of the way, every year it's coming true, and it's just been like unbelievable. So, I think to date, one of the coolest things that it's because it's very recent in my mind, but it's also something really cool that just happened back in March, end of February, beginning of March. It was actually announced that we are one of 10 companies that were selected for the Comcast NBC Universal Sports Tech Accelerator. So we were down in Florida just recently in Orlando. We got to stay at Universal Studios. We got to meet with the PGA Tour. We got taken to Daytona Speedway
Wow.
and met with NASCAR. We got to go to the Arnold Palmer Invitational, and Ricky Fowler walked by me. Like, what?
Yeah.
So literally, like, anyone who follows me on social media knows that I am very much like so excited about everything that happens. I'm not someone who's like, oh, I'm too cool for this. I'm like, I'm celebrating this because
Yeah.
we created this from nothing. Like, this didn't exist, and now we get to do these cool things. So that was an amazing week because it was like bucket list item one, bucket list
Mhm.
item two, check, 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 check. So on my rocking chair at 103, I think that's one highlight, but I know that there's going to be even more highlights. Oh, and I also just met President Biden, which was
Oh, wow.
amazing. Also, like, who am I?
Yeah.
So that was really cool too. So two things in 1 month that will definitely stick with me till I'm gonna live till I'm like 112 though. So
Oh, okay. Okay. That's good. That's good. Okay. And then the last question that then I do have, right? We went to 112, I guess is what we're gonna say. We go to way back in time now, right? We kind of go over your whole career and we chat with 16, 18, 20-year-old Shannon who's completing their degree, kind of figuring out that, hey, I want to break into the broadcasting space. What's one piece of advice that you would give to a younger version of yourself that you've now learned that, like, hey, like this is something I wish I knew at the beginning?
I would say definitely to my younger self to not be scared to be yourself, and to remember how strong you really are. So I think younger me, I always had a ton of friends, and I always just wanted to fit in with the crowd, and I always just went along with things.
Mm-hmm.
But I was always a leader as well. Like when I played hockey, I was always either a captain or an assistant captain. So I kind of had this like, I always had these competing mindsets of like, I really have to fit in, but I'm also like innately a leader. And I think I would tell my younger self to really be be a leader. Always, if you ever have to choose, be that leader and don't always go along with the crowd because the crowd is always going to do the same thing, and it's okay to be different.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, and that's exactly why I asked that question at the very end, because I think it just brings it all together, maybe even just kind of caps it off perfectly. So yeah, thank you so much for joining the podcast, and as always, I got a bunch of good notes, so hopefully we're gonna get amazing clips out of this as well. But unless there's anything else you'd like to share, thank you for coming on, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This conversation has been one of the most fun ones I've had. So I
Oh
really
yeah.
appreciate it. And I'm glad you got some good tips out of it.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you so much, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to enjoy this episode. But that's it for episode 132, if I'm not mistaken. And stay tuned for next week's episode, which will be with Chris, Shannon's co-founder. So looking forward to it. Thank you.